Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Sunday, May 11th, day 583 of the war. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our political correspondent Sam Sokol and reporter Sue Surkes. Thank you both for joining me today.
Good morning.
As the IDF is poised to roll out a much larger mission in the Gaza Strip, all eyes are on the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi community, and the fight for a universal conscription bill. Sam is here to discuss what is happening on that front, and more specifically, what is not. Sue is here just back from reporting on the Gaza envelope border with the Gaza Strip, and she is going to tell us about two new initiatives. One called Magen 48, which is bringing security teams up to spec with the level of IDF soldiers in terms of their training, and the other, perhaps for Mother's Day, perhaps not, is a women's initiative which is worthy of Rosie the Riveter. So all of this and more when we're back. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our political correspondent, Sam Sokol. Sam, the Knesset came back from break last week, and on the slate is, of course, this universal draft, this conscription bill that should be equitable in a way and also not let the coalition fall apart. So what is happening right now in terms of the threats from the ultra-Orthodox parties? How realistic are they in terms of pulling out of the coalition and basically crumbling the government?
Well, the ultra-Orthodox have repeatedly threatened to pull out of the government or topple the government in the past and have always backed down on their threats. One ultra-Orthodox lawmaker once told me that as long as some sort of modus vivendi can be reached, they're willing to wait on the bill. But patience seems to be wearing very, very thin. Last week, the ultra-Orthodox Shas and United Torah Judaism parties, in a coordinated move, said that they would not vote for any coalition legislation in the Knesset plenum so long as there's no forward movement on this bill. And one UTJ lawmaker, Yaakov Asher, went so far as to say in an interview that his party would no longer be able to stay in the coalition if this legislation doesn't pass. Now, it's very clear that if the government topples and the opposition takes power, from the ultra-Orthodox point of view, things are going to be a lot worse. The current government is not necessarily passing a bill exempting Haredi yeshiva students from military service, but on the other hand, they have not been making every effort possible to actually enlist or enforce any sort of sanctions on people who aren't enlisting. So the Haredim definitely know that it could be worse. However, they have to answer to their own voters and to their own rabbinic leadership, who actually controls the parties, who is very hardline. And at a certain point, they are going to feel that they've been backed into a corner. Multiple ultra-Orthodox journalists that I've spoken to who are close with the ultra-Orthodox leadership have said that things are serious now in a way it hasn't been before. It's hard to tell how much of that is messaging in order to create political pressure to get what they want and how much isn't. And it's also difficult to tell just what form a withdrawal from the government would take, meaning would we see United Torah Judaism withdraw and Shas remain? Would both parties leave, toppling the government? If UTJ leaves, is it going to leave and support the coalition from the outside while while remaining, part of the coalition but not part of the government? Or are we just going to see sort of a slow burn internal revolt where there'll be consistent boycotts against coalition legislation by the ultra-Orthodox parties? It's very hard to tell. But
Sam, let's talk sheer numbers right now. In terms of the coalition with Gideon Saar's group, with Ben Gvir, with the ultra-Orthodox, what is the number in terms of the coalition?
So the coalition currently has 68 out of 120 seats in the Knesset. And if United Torah Judaism, which is the more more strident party when it comes to enlistment issues, were to pull out, that would leave the government with a thin majority of 61 seats, but the government would be able to survive. It's only in a situation in which both Shas and United Torah Judaism pull out that we would see the government fall. If we start to see real serious action on the part of the IDF in terms of enlisting members of the ultra-Orthodox community and coming down hard on draft dodgers. Last week, the IDF Chief of Staff gave instructions to the IDF Manpower Directorate to come up with a plan to draft pretty much every eligible ultra-Orthodox male who isn't in the army. That would come to an additional 60,000 people. There's currently 80,000 who are between the ages of 18 and 26 who haven't enlisted. About almost 20,000 of them have received orders. Almost none of those have actually enlisted, around 2% or less. And now they would send to the rest. Now, the question is, if they send out all these orders and actually engage in enforcement, actually, impose penalties for people who aren't going into the army, if we see arrests of draft dodgers, if we see any sort of real push to give teeth to this policy, that is when the ultra-Orthodox parties are going to leave.
Well, it's quite probable that the IDF doesn't have the manpower in its military police to really implement these sanctions. So I doubt that's going to happen. And at the same time, in the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, we have MK Yuli Edelstein, who is really taking this issue seriously. It appears to me, looking at it from the side, and is in a way at the point in which new legislation needs to be written that weighs, of course, the coalition demand, but also weighs the demand of his electorate, Likud, and the rest of the Israeli serving public, which is just fed up with the idea that the Haredim, some 60,000, 80,000 males of eligible age and fitness probably, are not serving in the IDF while their sons and daughters are serving and dying in Gaza and in other forums. So what is Yuli Edelstein's role right now?
Well, just to give a little bit of background here, the bill that's currently before Yuli Edelstein's committee, it's a very contentious bill. Its supporters are calling it a chok giyus, an enlistment bill, and its detractors are calling it a chok hishtamtut, an evasion bill. As written, the bill would slowly increase the rate at which Haredim are enlisted into the IDF over a period of years at a very slow rate, and would lower the age at which Haredim are exempt from military service. Now, the second part of this was made completely irrelevant by last summer's High Court ruling, which said that all the exemptions that they've been enjoying have no legal basis. So what remains is essentially a bill slowly and not in very significant numbers, increasing the number of Haredim who go to the army. This bill was written during the previous Knesset, before October 7th, before the manpower shortage, when there seemed to be a consensus among many that the priority was getting Haredim into the workplace rather than into the military. So it's a bill that really doesn't fit the current needs. The ultra-Orthodox are backing this bill, demanding its passage, because what they want to do is they want a bill that would essentially reestablish the exemption set they previously enjoyed, or at the very least, give them enough breathing room to find another solution. Edelstein has said repeatedly that he is unwilling to accept such a law. His committee will only pass a law that addresses both equality and the manpower needs of the IDF. He's also rejected a proposal by Defense Minister Israel Katz, which would see the number of Haredim enlisted in the IDF rise slowly over a period of 7 years until it reaches half of all eligible Haredim, meaning half of the annual cohort of Haredim turning 18 by 2032. The rest of those Haredim going forward, you would have every year half the Haredim go into the army and half be allowed to continue learning in yeshiva without doing military service. Edelstein has rejected this as unacceptable, and he has said he wants a law that has harsh financial sanctions on ultra-Orthodox draft dodgers. This is something, obviously, that is not really particularly acceptable to the Haredi parties. In fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu held an emergency meeting last week between Edelstein and Katz and Aryeh Deri of the ultra-Orthodox Shas party to try to come to a compromise. Yitzhak Goldknopf, the head of the United Torah Judaism Party, was reportedly not invited because all the other parties agreed that he wasn't someone who could come to any sort of compromise. He was too hardline on the issue. But even without Goldknopf, the parties were unable to come to any sort of conclusion or agreement. Now, what's happening now is last Thursday, Edelstein's committee held its last and final hearing on the issue before starting the process of having the staff of the committee rewrite the bill, a new version, a new draft of the bill based on the discussion so far. So now we're waiting to find out what is going to be in this bill that Edelstein wants to advance to its second and third readings. And can he square the circle between the necessity of getting the Haredim on board, something that they can accept, and doing something that could be accepted by everybody else? And that's going to be very difficult.
Just briefly, Sam, of course, elections are only set for October 2026 in the meantime. And you have to wonder, at least the cynic in me is wondering, is Edelstein's stance a principled stance, or is it a way to jostle the Likud party? If you recall, even 10 years ago or so, if I'm not mistaken, Yuli Edelstein was polling as number 2 in the party, or even number 1 in some of the polling, and under Netanyahu, of course. And so I just have to wonder, how much is Edelstein putting his ducks in a row, as it were? How much of it is a principled stance? Because obviously the Likud electorate, for the most part, is serving in the IDF. And is that too cynical of an approach to see this problem as well, Sam?
Look, it's really always hard to say what's happening behind the scenes, what's happening in politicians' minds, what factors they're weighing. What I can say is that Edelstein has set himself up as someone who is opposing Netanyahu on this, but he has also not come out against Netanyahu on other issues. It feels like he's conserving all of his ammunition on this one thing and really, really trying to be focused on it. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding.
Okay, the proof is in the pudding, and so far it's very half-baked. So we're going to go to a break now. Sam, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our reporter, Sue Surkes. Now, Sue, you have been reporting from the Gaza envelope area for months and months now. And recently you have 2 very interesting initiatives. Let's start with Magan 48, which is basically if I'm reading, and well, I edited your story, so if I edited your story properly, it is basically an initiative that was started to increase the preparedness of these security teams that were so decimated in the October 7th massacre of Hamas, and to bring them to the level that they should be, or that they were at one point when they were fighters in the IDF.
I think that the first thing to do is to describe what a security team is. It's a strange animal. A security team on a kibbutz or a moshav or in a city is a group of volunteer men on the whole, often fathers in their 30s and 40s, who volunteer to help defend their communities and are trained by the IDF. So they're civilians who've done army service, but who are being trained to defend their communities by the IDF. Now, what actually happened on October the 7th, as we remember, and as the army's own testimonies have shown, is that the army was not there. A lot of the fighting fell on the shoulders of these security teams who were not properly trained and who were not properly armed. And the reason why they weren't properly armed is because in 2022, after a spate of robberies, thefts, the IDF took away the long guns, the rifle type guns, and said that they can only be returned if they are locked into an armory or some other facility for locking them away. What we actually saw, so in a place like Sderot, they had not organized an armory, so the security team members were not able really to help defend on October the 7th. But there were a number of kibbutzim where the guns were locked away in the armory, but the person who had the key was killed early on, so they couldn't get to the guns. So what happened was that in the immediate aftermath of the war, an Australian immigrant, actually, we've got two stories about Australian immigrants today. An Australian immigrant called Ari Briggs, who's been here for a long time, he linked up with a friend of his, Ilan Isaacson, who was a chrysanthemum farmer. Ilan is originally from South Africa, but for decades has been a chrysanthemum farmer in a moshav on the Gaza border. After the Gaza war of 2014, he swapped his flowers to be the head of security at the Eshkol Regional Authority. They were both good friends. And so Ari toured around, very soon after October the 7th, he toured around the kibbutzim and the moshavim, talking to people about what had gone wrong. And when he got to kibbutz Erez, he was told a different story from the ones he'd been told before. Kibbutz Erez lost one member of the security team. There were no civilian casualties. And it turned out that they had been trained through a friend of a friend by an expert in counterterrorism called Ehud Driben. Now, Ari immediately tracked down Ehud Driben and discovered that from 2004, Ehud had voluntarily trained security teams in 64 villages in Israel, most of them in the West Bank. He is a guy who has worked for the IDF. He's worked for armies and police forces all over the world, evidently really knows his stuff. And the two of them got together and created this project through, I should say that Ehud Driben has a non-profit called Magen Yehuda, and the two of them created a project called Magen 48. In fact, Ehud is the one who created the military side of the project. Ehud has excellent contacts with the IDF, and together with the IDF, he put together a program which goes much, much further than what the security teams were getting prior to October the 7th, which was basically a couple of days on the shooting range each year. The courses are, first of all, include pistol training, which the IDF, the original IDF training did not include. Also, tailor-made defence plans have been made for each of the villages in accordance with their topography and all sorts of other considerations. And they're really learning a very broad breadth of subjects, being trained in the field, in their kibbutz, under lots of different scenarios, so that it's a very much individualized training. And for two of those meetings, the IDF is joining them in their community, so that there's going to be absolute coordination, which was also lacking on October the 7th.
So this is just one initiative that you've reported on, and this piece has already been published. You can read it on the site, and of course, there's a link in the program notes. Magen 48, Magen 48, not Magan as I initially said. Magen Shield 48. Presumably for the 1948 declaration.
No. In fact, it turns out they thought that 48 security members or first responders had been murdered on October the 7th, so they called it Magen 48, and then discovered that it was actually 46 from the Gaza envelope, by which time they decided to just leave the name as it was, because it does echo 1948.
Correct. Okay, fascinating. Now, Sue, you were also recently in the Gaza envelope area, and you had what you said to me after you came back was just a fascinating evening with women who are promoting tools in order to give other women the ability to create initiatives to help those in the Western Negev. So tell me about what you learned there.
This was very, very eye-opening, and it's a project of another Australian immigrant called Kylie Eiserman-Lifshitz, a mother of 5 who lives in Jerusalem. Kylie's been involved for many years now with gender issues. She was chairman of Mavoi Satum, which is an organisation that helps Jewish women whose husbands won't give them a divorce. And what she realised after the October the 7th was a huge gap between, on the one hand, a massive lack of representation of women in Israel, really at all levels of government and decision-making and all levels of business as well. But on the other hand, the fact that women shouldered a lot of the responsibility in their communities. You know, many of them have husbands who are doing hundreds of days of reserve duty. They're continuing to work in many cases. They are bringing up their children. And they're also, you know, they were there to set up the command centers to help distribute all sorts of things that were needed by the evacuees and by families and what have you. But there's really been a huge mushrooming of social projects. And on many occasions, it was women who were and are behind them. So Kylie set up a non-profit called She Rise. And one of the programs of that not-for-profit is called Kumi, which is the female version of, you know, get up, rise. And the aim is also to raise seed funding for their projects, because Kylie realised that there is very, very little philanthropic support for programs for girls and women. You know, what became very clear to me is that many of these women, you know, and as women, this is something that I know, and I'm sure you know, you know, we always have to be better than everybody else. In many cases, we have to be better than the men to prove our mettle. And many women have tremendous self-confidence problems. So that part of this program is to boost their self-confidence and to convince them that they actually can do the things that they've dreamed for a long time about doing. So on the day that I was there, it was the penultimate one for this particular group in one particular local authority. So it was the 12th session of 13, and they were supposed to get together and start mapping out the projects that they wanted to create. Some of them did it in groups, others did it individually. And just to give a couple of examples, there was one woman she's worked in mental health and with the elderly, and she lost a brother to a traffic accident when she was 17, and both her parents were killed in a traffic accident when she was 24. And she always dreamed about helping other people who are in the situation that she's been in, and she finally has the confidence to do that. There was another woman I met, a young Orthodox woman, and really, you know, it's across the spectrum, Jewish, Bedouin, religious, secular, a lovely Orthodox woman who spent 2.5 years in Schneider Children's Hospital because her little toddler was diagnosed with cancer, and thankfully has gotten over that cancer. But she said she felt incredibly lonely during that time in hospital. And as she had experience with autistic families before that, she has decided to set up an afternoon support group for autistic families who also often feel very lonely. And she's already set it up. She's going to be doing that in Ofakim. She's looking for other partners. And the third one of many was two women got together both single parent families. One of them has made a great success of being a radio personality in the South and already performing. I heard her singing. She's got a great voice. Very, very extrovert. And the other one she actually discovered that she could make money. I mean, she said that she got to the stage, no alimony. She got to the stage where she couldn't afford to go to the supermarket. And she discovered online marketing, and that pulled her out of her poverty. And Kumi has given her the confidence and the tools to now set up a course online which teaches other women how to do that network marketing. And the two of those women are going to launch a new podcast called Yalla Kumi, which means, get on with it. Let's all get on our feet, which will feature successful women businessmen and also create a database of women entrepreneurs, just like the conferences that Kumi is running, to put women together so that if you want to create a business and you're looking for different skills, you can find them amongst other women.
Okay, the story is, of course, forthcoming, but look for it on the site. Sue, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by the Podwaves and video edited by Thomas Gersh. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.